State Representative Dorothy Moon spent some time, a good portion of her life, as a school teacher. You then might be able to say when she talks about educational issues, she's got a pretty good grasp of what she's discussing. It's 7:34. We're at 21. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, and I've been tracking some of the social media over the last several weeks, and Representative Moon is beginning a lot of feedback about Common Core. Let's just put it this way. I think there's a disconnect between some people working within the educational system in Idaho and the general public at large about the success of this program. We wanted to mention the representative is joining us this morning. Of course, she's going to be off in about an hour to a legislative hearing. But first of all, welcome back to the program.
Oh, thank you, Bill. I love being on your show.
Well, we love having you, and I like the fact that you do bring some expertise to this subject, and you were featured in some of these stories the last few days about hearings on Common Core. And in fact, I think you were one of those people who made a comment that when you're out and you're traveling around the state, you get an entirely different reaction about it than you do from a lot of the people who come in from the education department and offer testimony.
Well, and I do. And, even in 2011, when we started seeing the Common Core come into our schools, and I saw it in especially special education on some data collection, that threw up some red flags for me. And I retired in 2012, and it really came on full board 2012-13. And I guess when I first ran for office, when I was going door to door, I literally heard from people all the way from Emmett to Idaho City to Salmon that the kids aren't liking Common Core at all. They come home frustrated. They're crying because they used to be able to add and subtract just by lining up the digits, and now they had to use all these figures to try to get to a certain answer. And I think it's really disheartening because, you want kids to be excited about going to school, and you want them to feel successful. And it's a really blow to one's self-esteem when you aren't successful and you don't understand why, and the parents don't understand why.
I remember my high school guidance counselor telling me one time, and he was a pretty smart guy. He'd been a pilot in the U.S. Navy, and then taught for many years before becoming a guidance counselor. And he said that he was a big proponent of rote memory. But today it seems that a lot of people in the education establishment just simply don't trust the old ways we used to do things.
Well, it's amazing. The world kept spinning, and and everybody was successful as engineers or mathematicians and physicists and all these other scientific, mathematic, STEM jobs as they call them now. And yeah, we seem to get by without it. And today the math facts by grade 5, those are a good thing for them to know. We've got kids now who use debit cards. They couldn't balance a checkbook if their life depended on it. They just swipe, and they never really even know what's in their account. And I think they're setting themselves up for failure and for being in a life of debt until they can understand how to budget and how to manage their finances personally.
The other day at one of these hearings, there was some discussion from the folks inside the education system saying how well this has worked for everyone, but you were sharing with me during the news break that we just had some figures that came out on Friday night that would say otherwise.
Well, yes, this is the typical way to release important data to the public at large. It was 5:39, I believe, was the correct number. In the evening on a holiday weekend, the State Department of Education released our graduation rates. And last year they were 80.6, or 2 years ago 80.6. They were hoping for an increase to 87.3. Well, that didn't happen. It went to 80.7. So we have a tenth of an increase, and to me that's just unacceptable. When these standards have been promised to get kids up above the mark, they're going to be working harder, more rigorous. That's the big word of the day, and we're not seeing it.
There was a young woman who testified from Gem County the other day. Her name was Tiffany, and it caught my attention because I've known her for 10 years. She moved to Idaho, I moved to Idaho, but I'd met her at a political rally of all places in Oak Orchard, Delaware in 2010.
Oh
And
my gosh.
she's a substitute teacher near where she lives. And she came in and spoke. And she was one of the few people critical in the hearing of Common Core. It just seems, though, that we didn't have a lot of room for those people to bring their voices in.
And Bill, that's what's been really unfortunate, and I think that's where I get upset because the process hasn't been fair. And I want to tell you, on the hearing that was Wednesday on the English language arts, it was only supposed to go until 11 o'clock because that's when we were supposed to be on the floor. Well, the chairman called the speaker and asked for an extension because there were a few more people who wanted to testify. It wasn't a few, it was more about 20. And so we were sitting in that committee room until 12:10. None of us on the committee ever made it up to the floor. And so people who were in opposition to Common Core, we knew that there wasn't going to be time for them to testify. But then all of a sudden, another hour and 10 minutes showed up, and I thought, well, isn't that interesting? So that kind of got my ire up. And then the next day in the math standards one is where I brought up that it hasn't been fair at all.
Wanted to mention we're speaking with State Representative Dorothy Moon joining us this morning. She is in a conference room in Boise at the state legislature. We're at 22. It's coming up on 7:40. Bill Colley with you on Magic Valley this morning. And do want to point out that Representative Moon is a one-time school teacher, so she might be bringing something to this argument that would be worthwhile. But the one thing I've noticed is, from the media standpoint, clearly that the folks in mainstream media, they're in love with this Common Core program, and of course you don't necessarily. I guess you'd be Idaho's Martha McSally with your reaction to them. They're trying to give the impression, I think, in some of these stories, that you're trying to throw a monkey wrench into this and ignoring the fact that you might actually be looking to get a course correction going.
It isn't just me. It's the testimony of the citizens of Idaho. So who comes out to testify against Common Core? People have dealt with its families, and who comes out in support of it? Teachers and the administrators and the State Department of Education, the State Board of Education. What they sorely forget is they work for us. They work for the people of Idaho, and that's it has been totally lost in this entire argument. If the folks are saying all across the state that this isn't working, their kids, so they're now homeschooling. I was at a meeting in Jim County actually Wednesday night after the ELA hearing, English Language Arts. There were 4 people who had pulled their kids out of school because of the difficulty the kids were having with this new math.
In fact, I just got a comment in, and this is coming from all the way out in Teton Valley. It says Common Core would be fine when used as a way to measure progress for the purpose of comparison to other states, but the writer says it's devolved into changing the way the fundamentals are taught. And he said, and then there's a little bit more to this. I've got to expand the page, I guess, to see what it says. But he says that teach the kids, and give me just a moment here. He said, I think that might be the end of it. He said, teach the kids to think. Don't teach the kids what to think. Does he make a good point?
Yes, he does. And, you know, when I taught in high school science, I remember we were always told, do not teach to the test. Do not do it. You teach them a broad enough amount of material and information to where when they take a test, they can determine diameter from radius. They could do meiosis or mitosis. I mean, I'm just saying there was a broad enough amount of information that you could determine if the student was understanding it or not. And today we use the SBAC, and it's costing $24 million to test statewide. Guess how much it cost before we incorporated the SBAC? About $700,000 to $800,000 is all it costs to test the students statewide. Now, you tell me if there's not a problem. That's a lot of money.
I'm trying to do a little math in my head. That's about 30 times more than what it cost before.
It is. It is. And see, people don't understand these figures. And when you look at the numbers, somebody's making a lot of money on a test.
I have another message from Rupert, and the writer says, we were able to put a man on the moon with the real math and the technology of analog phones. What is wrong with the math of engineering and science, which is the real math, the writer asks.
I agree wholeheartedly. And, today my husband is a licensed surveyor and engineer, and we're just not putting surveyors that aren't making it through school. And, I think, the math part is so important. You can't have 4 plus 4 equals 9 just because you can explain it away or you feel it should be 9. Because when you build a bridge or you're building a road, your numbers must be exact. So, this is a concrete discipline. This is not an abstract discipline, and we have to treat it as such.
We got to get to a break, but can you stick around for another 15 minutes or so?
I'd love to, Bill. Thank you.
I know that somebody's probably going to come knocking soon and say, hey, hearing's getting underway. So we'll have more coming up with State Representative Dorothy Moon in just a couple of minutes. But first, we've got the Rush Morning Update on the way and the weather, too. We're at 21. It's 7:45 on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Bill Colley with you until 10 a.m. We have a few more minutes with State Representative Dorothy Moon. She's talking with us about her goal of eliminating Common Core in Idaho. And if you'd like to reach her, our telephone number, 208-736-0300. 22 right now. And of course, Representative Moon was a school teacher prior to becoming involved in legislative politics. Bill Colley with you on Magic Valley this morning. Thanks for spending some time with us. Representative, right off the top here, I've got to add that Idaho calls it Idacore or something like that, and I hear people say, well, it's not really Common Core, but that would be like saying a green shirt is chartreuse instead of green. I mean, we're really splitting hairs here. It's almost Orwellian how they try to come up with a different name to cover it.
Well, and you're right. And see, I think that's why the public at large is kind of questioning the intentions here when you have Common Core, Idaho content standards. Now they're back to calling it Common Core. And we've had a couple of representatives go through the original standards and then the Idaho content standards, and there was literally no difference between them. So, sleight of hand, but you've got to remember when Common Core first came in almost a decade ago, it was not called Common Core. In fact, a lot of our good conservatives who were in the House at that time and the Senate, they didn't even know what they were signing because it was a switcheroo. They switched it, and then all of a sudden they found out Common Core had just been signed, and it came in under rule, and it was very unfortunate because had they known it was Common Core instead of what they were being told it was, they never would have passed it. So it's always been just a little questionable how Common Core originally got in our state, and I think that distrust just is kind of built with the people, especially when they've seen the results and their grandkids or kids coming home and not wanting to go back to school.
Writers say education has become the new government. It does not operate within its budget. It does not respect
Correct.
Research and obvious outcomes. It is ruining an entire generation of Americans, this writer says.
It has. It's been a 10-year failed experiment, and we need to admit that, and then turn things around. There are other standards out there, so that's been brought up in the committee hearing. Oh, it'll be total chaos if we drop these standards. Well, I think these teachers already have their lesson plans completed until July 1, or they should, and then in July, I think we need to start looking at incorporating other standards. And there are states that have some very successful plans, and where they're achievement is not flatlined, it's accelerating. So I think, there's a way out, and they need to look at it, but they don't even want to look at it.
Well, I'm going to try to squeeze a caller in, and I just asked the callers to be brief to give our guest, who's only got a few more minutes, an opportunity to respond. Caller, you're on the air on KLIX.
Good morning. Appreciate Representative Moon's and taking time to expose Common Core. I haven't heard all the conversation, but it comes from the United Nations. Initially, they're socialism on steroids. And I have a university professor at an Idaho college, and he said these kids that are coming in as graduates out of our high schools are all believing socialism is the wave of the future. And it is really sad. I think it's all about the money again, and it usually is, but I testified at the State Board of Education here, and the kids that testified had just read whatever off of their phones. The young teachers have all been to the universities and been propagandized, but this thing's got to stop, because I know families where their students, they've pulled them out of school as well, because it's a dumbing down process, and it's meant to be that way. It is just totally un-American, and we need to drop Common Core like a hot rock.
Thank you for the call. I just saw this morning, in fact, following up on what he's talking about, at Northwest Nazarene this weekend, there's going to be a program offering parents alternatives. So it sounds like it's going to be a big event.
Well, great. And that's what parents need. They need choice. And I've always been a big proponent of choice. If the public education system is failing your student or your child, then you need to look at that. You need to look at what's best to keep your child whole. And, I appreciate, the teachers that have contacted me who they want to let me know. I have a math teacher from Southern Idaho. I'm not naming names because I don't want them to be gone after or sought after and try to get their job because they've come against Common Core. So a 15-year math teacher said this has been the most horrific thing for her students that she has ever seen, and she applauds the efforts to remove it. And that isn't the only one, but I've got to remove names because they will go after those teachers.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised. We have a caller. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX with State Representative Dorothy Moon. Go ahead.
Good morning. Sorry about that. I agree with that last gentleman, and I think it goes even farther than that. I think this stuff is by design, and I think it's done by the Department of Education, because the only thing that a government entity can do is try to survive and support itself. And it's all about power, and it's not about the people. It's about government power, and it separates our children from us.
Want to thank the caller. Representative, your reply.
Oh, I agree. It does separate the parents from the child. So when you can't help them do their homework because it's so confusing, and then you have to hire a tutor, you wouldn't believe how many parents I have talked to that have had to hire tutors. In fact, Ken Roberts was one of our experts providing testimony on ELA and math, and he math tutors in Salmon. And like he said, I fixed the mistakes that this Common Core has created for these students, and he has to work with them to get them through school, and he does this on his own. He's got an outstanding background. He has 3 degrees. He's been an architect for 45 years, and he gets it. He sees that we have a big problem, especially in math. So, there are people who are trying to help these kids struggle through it, but, it's a slog. It's hard for people, to keep volunteering or going to the school and help, and a lot of people do that, and I applaud them. But it shouldn't be this hard. And learning should be fun, and I think we've really lost the love of learning with a lot of our kids.
We've only got about a little under 2 minutes to go, so caller, you got to make it quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, this gal sharp as a tack. My sister and my brother-in-law were school teachers, and they nicknamed it Ida Slow.
Oh, that was good.
Can I use that?
Yes. We'll tell you what. I think we can, on that note, we'll squeeze in one very quick call. No, okay. I think we lost that caller. But before we wrap up, and let me just add this. You brought this up a couple of minutes ago when you mentioned people say, well, what would happen if we eliminated this? This would be disaster. Look, we could go back to the default position of where we were prior, and then while we're coming up with something new, just go back to what was already in existence for decades, right?
I agree. These fear tactics, that's what I don't like. Be truthful. I used to teach with standards, and the standards are pretty generic. It's the SBAC test and the curriculum that comes with it that's been the harm. So, again, the standards are pretty generic. And, you have to have certain skills by a certain year of education, but yes, I agree 100%, Bill. We can go back to how the standards were over a decade ago.
I got about 30 seconds. Brock in Twin Falls writes and says that similar to No Child Left Behind, we're just forcing kids to drop out of school sooner.
It's sad. It's very sad. And and if they don't drop out, but they get out of school and they have to take 2 years of remediation in our colleges, and it takes 6 years to get a college degree if that's what they want to do. And that's too much debt for those kids to carry with them.
Good for the colleges, though.
Thank you, Bill. That's another day. We can talk about that another day.
Hey, look, we're going to have to talk about this again really soon.
Okay, sounds great.
All right. I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it, Bill. You have a good day.
You too. State Representative Dorothy Moon joining us this morning from a conference room at the state legislative offices in Boise. We've got the news coming up in just a moment on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're at 21. It's 7:59. Gosh, a lot to talk about. Oh, an impeachment trial, I guess, is starting tomorrow, right?